Channel, everybody. Thanks for joining me in the record room today for another installment of Reggae Spinout, records either new to the collection or that have seen a listen again recently. My name is Doug. If you are new here, we're going to jump right into it with a handy collection of Mighty 2 productions from the 1970s, put out in 2022 by Winston Edwards Studio 16 label in the UK. The Mighty 2, the 1970s and early 80s production partnership of Joe Gibbs and studio engineer Errol Thompson. Winston Edwards himself, I believe, a cousin to Joe Gibbs. This is the Belmont Records Collection, Volume 1, The Mighty 2, put out by Studio 16 in 2022. All tracks recorded between 1975 and 1978. Various artists compilation with some well-known songs that longer-term fans of the music will have elsewhere, have known for a long time, but a few rarities and obscurities maybe not easily to be found elsewhere. You have the Freaks with Coolett Brothers, Earl 16's version of Malcolm X. Those two were big draws for me. Also Culture's, I believe, non-LP single This Time, early Culture track. And two of the heaviest tunes in Joe Gibbs's catalog, Nago Morris's Susu Pon Rasta, that was ferociously DJ'd over by Prince Farai as Under Heavy Manners, and of course Silford Walker's Herb Anthem, Burn Babylon. Those all appeared on Belmont, which was a sub-label of the Joe Gibbs group of labels. You can see that track right here on Belmont, Silford Walker's crucial Burn Babylon. Very handy and affordably priced collection of Joe Gibbs productions here from Winston Edwards Studio 16 imprint. Album by reggae singer Desi Roots, Doing It Right, was originally released in 1980 on the Hawkeye label, a label based out of a record shop of the same name located in Harlesden, UK. Shop and label co-founder Roy Forbes Allen was responsible for producing this LP, recorded in Jamaica. Desi Roots himself was a Jamaican born and raised singer, was reportedly working as an agricultural officer while making the rounds of the hotels, performing as a singer alongside show bands like Now Generation and the Caribs. It was with the latter one day while he was singing on stage at the prestigious Sheraton Hotel that Desi was spotted by aspiring independent music producer Jimmy Radway. Apparently the two had kind of known each other before that. Radway brought Desi into the studio to record a song called Warning, credited to his real name Desmond Young. That song can be found on the essential Keep the Pressure Down compilation of Jimmy Radway Productions. Desmond Young with Warning would be DJ'd over by Big Youth as Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. However, it would be a few years before a proper solo debut LP would appear, and when it did, it was credited to Desi Roots. As that name implies, kind of roots and culture material, but also about half soulful, kind of love-oriented songs. There's a cover of Teddy Pendergrass's Close the Door, which is the final song on the album, but some key roots and culture steppers tempoed tracks on here, which would be dropped by Josh Shaka in his dances at the time in exclusive mixes, only to be played by his sound system. These include the lead-off track Weed Fields, big song at the time. It's actually adapted from the Brothers' 4 folk hit Green Fields, but this time bemoaning police in their helicopters burning down the weed fields, stamping out the underground economy that they generated. Uptown Rebel takes something of a scornful look at privileged uptown kids growing out their locks, heading downtown to hang with the ghetto sufferers, posing as Rastas, as rebels. The title track itself, Go Day Right, with sort of the pugilistic horn refrain that would make Rocky Balboa stand up just a little bit straighter, telling the listener, whatever you do it right, do it proper. There's a carnal aspect to the song, but also a more universal application as well, as he says, I don't care if you're black or white, put your poverty or your wealth aside, you're gonna have to go they right. In other words, do things to the best of your abilities at all times. Also does a cover of Nature Boy, the Nat King Cole classic penned by Eden Abez, classic Roots album from the time, back again in print, 2023 reissue here.
I don't mind what you wanna call it. I don't care if it's day or night. I want you to know if you're gonna do it, you're expected to do it right. Do it right, do it right. Well, everyone should do it right. Do it right, do it right. Well, everyone should do it right.
Also appearing in the early 1980s on the Hawkeye label in the UK was an album called Dub Duel, credited to mixing engineers Scientist, Hopeton Brown, and Crucial Bunny, Anthony Graham, two top-ranking mixing engineers of the early 1980s in somewhat of the fashion of the time, positioning it as a clash or a showdown between the two. One takes one side's worth of tracks, the other takes the other side. It's up to the listener to decide who's the winner. This appeared on Hawkeye in the UK, but this is a 2019 reissue on Dub Music. While not strictly a track-for-track match to the Desi Roots album, this does contain dubs to some of the key tracks from that album, including Burn Them, mixed by Scientist, which is a dub to Weed Fields. Jeremiah's Special, I believe that is He Ain't Coming. Take the Fight itself, with that memorable horn refrain, reworks the title track of the Desi Roots album. Classic early 1980s dub, some syndrome elements weaving through, and two mixing engineers at the top of their game, taking absolutely no prisoners. musician and radio personality Wayne Chin would in the early 1970s form a group called Creole, the name a nod to his own mixed ethnic heritage, and the band intended to encompass a wide roster of players, somewhat inspired by Earth, Wind, and Fire in the US, who would play a smoother, broader palette of reggae that could incorporate influences of rock, soul, and funk. Things didn't quite go according to plan, but the band did record a scattershot series of singles through the 1970s, never recorded an LP. They would become mysterious in later years, with a couple of their songs achieving longevity and notoriety. One of the earliest was Ja Creation, Creole, recorded at Channel 1 Studio, but self-produced by the group. A few years later, that would inspire an instrumental cover version by a mysterious ad hoc group of players called the Overnight Players, and would appear on a 1980 LP called Babylon Destruction, becoming a big underground roots hit. The second was one by the band called Beware, their band's story now told on a double LP compilation from DKR Records out of New York. Creole and China Freaka. China Freaka, a later incarnation of the group in the 1980s in the US, making even more plain Wayne Chin's vision of music and ethnic identity being interlinked, culture and music inextricably linked. Includes two sides of vocals and two sides of accompanying dub versions. That second song that Creole would become notorious for was called Beware of Your Enemies, here just called Beware. I first heard that song on the Pressure Sounds compilation Well Charged. That song would be re-recorded at Channel 1 Studio by the Revolutionaries under the new title of Kunta Kinte, and would inspire in the UK the notorious dub plate of the same name under a convoluted and mysterious series of circumstances. That track was even included in Steve McQueen's recent Small Axe series of films. By the late 1970s, early 1980s, however, Wayne Chin had relocated to the US. The original group somewhat fell apart, and he recruited a new lineup as China Freaka, pursuing his vision of a mixed palette of reggae with rock and funk influences, a crucial reissue from DKR Records out of New York City, including many previously unreleased and hard to find tracks. For today, the debut album by reggae singer Phillip Fraser, Come Ethiopians, originally released circa the late 1970s in Jamaica on the Freedom Sounds label. This is a recent expanded reissue through Patat Records out of France. Fraser was part of the Freedom Sounds collective, established by producer Bertram Brown out of his yard in the Greenwich Farm neighborhood of Kingston, as a space where artists and musicians could come together, live, work, and create music in something of a cooperative and communal setting. The label would have a strong roots and culture focus, a very local focus, with many artists and musicians close residents of the area, and achieve quite a distinctive sound through use of the Soul Syndicate Band with dub versions mixed at King Tubby's studio. Many of the dubs to tracks on this Phillip Fraser album can be found on the Blood and Fire compilation Freedom Sounds in Dub, where I first got a taste of Freedom Sounds. Phillip Fraser, classic debut album from a lesser known singer. This is an expanded reissue, including a couple of dub versions, some tracks that did not appear on the original. There is a guest appearance by Prince Allah and a couple of extended disco mix tracks, which were beginning to be the fashion of the time in the late 1970s, incorporating dub versions in the mix. That's it for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for the next video, and cheers.